Before we get started with this episode, I want to let you know that this conversation will touch on topics of suicide. So if that is something that hits a little bit too close to home for you or something that you have a little trouble with, please take care of yourself as you listen to this episode. And, if it's more than you can handle, certainly we understand that and catch you at the next episode. In this episode, we're going to talk a lot about the weight that we carry home after deployments, the sleepless nights, the outbursts that we don't even recognize are happening, the way that our families sometimes get the fallout of things that maybe we just can't explain. There's pain there. And there's also ways to start recognizing these warning signs sooner, either in ourselves or in a loved one. Recognizing it earlier opened up the doors to conversations that sometimes might feel impossible. Maybe it's due to your job or security clearances, and we can push for changes in ourselves or in our loved ones that make the support more accessible without risking these careers or security clearances. That's the hope anyways. Ashley Sylvester, our guest today, lived through all of this alongside her late husband, Army Sergeant Jason Sylvester. In the episode, she opens up about the deployments he went on, the walls that went up at home, the warning signs that she noticed, and the heartbreak of losing him. Her story isn't an easy one to tell, and I definitely commend her for coming on and being able to share the story. But it's a real story, and they're real people, and it's not something that just happens to other people. It's exactly the kind of story and honesty that we need to hear. And we need to talk about these things more. So I'm glad to be able to have Ashley on the show. Before we get into the episode, though, as I do on a lot of episodes, I do want to take a moment to raise awareness for something that's deeply important to me, and I think to a lot of us in our community here. The Global War on Terrorism Memorial Foundation is an organization that is working to build a permanent national memorial in Washington, D.C. to honor the service members, families, and the civilians who were impacted by the global war on terrorism. This memorial will serve as both a tribute to those who served and as a way to ensure that their sacrifices are recognized and remembered for generations to come. If you would like to learn more about the memorial or find out how you can support their mission, visit gwatmemorialfoundation.org. Now, let's get into today's episode. Hey, Ashley, welcome to the show. I'm really glad to have you here. I'm looking forward to our conversation, for you to be able to share your story, your family story with us today. But yeah, first off, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Scott. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. So, this conversation, just for the listeners, talking about, you're going to talk about your husband and kind of stuff that went on with him. I'm not going to give too many, spoiler alert kind of thing right now. I'm going to let you kind of fill in some of the blanks on all that. But before we kind of dive into his story, tell us a little bit about your husband, kind of his background and, where he served, that type of thing. And then, all that kind of stuff. And that way we just kind of have a general idea of, who it is that we're talking about here.
Yes, my late husband was U.S. Army Sergeant Jason Sylvester, and we both were from the small towns of rural areas of Oklahoma. So we didn't really know each other growing up, but we were friends of friends, and we ended up dating in early 2000, and he entered into the United States Army, going to Fort Jackson for his basics, and initially had signed up for intel analyst work and was very excited about that. He wanted to do something for our country, so he wanted to serve, and it was a conversation that we had at a very early age, him entering into the military, but wanted to do something with himself also, and do something for our country. And he felt really compelled after high school to serve in the military. Brilliant young man. And when we first started dating, unbeknownst to me, he told everybody, I'm going to marry her. It was really super cute. I didn't know that until right before we got married. But people around were talking like, he said he was going to marry you a long time ago, but you didn't even know it. But he even told my brothers that he was really good friends with my brothers. So,
That's awesome.
yeah, he served in the United States Army, and some of the places that we went were our first duty station was in Germany.
Okay.
So he was really excited about that. Vilseck, Germany, shout out. So we were there for almost 4 years. 4 years serving over in Vilseck, Germany. We got to know the community very well. And while we were in Germany, his first deployment was to Kosovo, almost a year. Deployment wasn't near as taxing on his mentals as the next deployment. While we were in Germany for those 4 years, his second deployment was for a year to Iraq. It was the second round of deployments to Iraq. So that one was the one that was a bit of a doozy. I say that and loosely, but he really was affected by that first deployment to Iraq, which was his second year deployment.
So,
And go ahead. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
no. You mentioned how there's kind of a difference. Like the Kosovo deployment was not so bad, for him, but then the Iraq deployment was a little bit worse. And I I just have to ask, like, kind of, like, was there any kind of attitude changes, or things like that personality changes, I guess, I mean, or behaviors, maybe like from what he was before going on that deployment to what he was after, like that were kind of things that stood out to you, like whoa, where's this coming from, that type of thing.
Yes, well, I want to say that first deployment was effective. It did. That first 10 months to Kosovo was effective for him. He did end up coming back having a hard time sleeping, and it was just the first of many signs that I had seen of having hardships from post-traumatic stress. Up in the middle of the night, having bad dreams, remembering things that he had to do there. But like you said, from that first deployment to the second deployment, which was to Iraq for a year, that was significantly a huge change. I witnessed several things of his demeanor, his patterns, his behaviors were significantly different after that. It was much more than just having bad dreams. It was much more than not being able to sleep, or I was noticing even more so of a hypervigilance, so to speak, and remembering things that happened to battle buddies, things that he couldn't talk to me about. It was very significant of a change I noticed.
Now, were they things, you said things that he couldn't talk to you about? Were they things that he couldn't talk to you about, or just wouldn't talk to you about?
Both, a
Okay.
combination of both. He did have things that he could not talk to me about. Being an intel analyst
Right.
in Special Operations Command, he really couldn't talk about a majority of things, that their operations were, their exercises, or what their jobs were.
Hmm.
There were several things that he had to do that I didn't know where he was, or I may not hear from him for days.
Hmm.
And being a young military wife, I didn't really realize the magnitude. Looking back on it now, um, it was concerning. It is concerning for some of these younger military wives and soldiers that are going through the same thing right now that I had been through 12, 15 years ago. And one of those things was the significance of the progression that I saw in the characteristics, the demeanor, the behaviors, the hardships that came from just that second deployment, um, was significant.
Yeah, so I was asking about the question. It was it stuff that he couldn't talk about or wouldn't talk about, and the reason why I was asking is because first off, you mentioned he was in intelligence, and so I got to imagine there's some classified things, maybe that he literally just couldn't talk about, because you don't want to be leaking that kind of information out to just anybody, and not that you're just anybody, but like without security clearances and all that kind of stuff, you don't really want to be talking about that, but
Yeah.
what I think makes matters worse is that because he couldn't talk about certain things, things that maybe he would be able to, I don't want to say unburden himself and like burden you or anything like that, but just you know how life is. You know, you come back from a tough day at work, even, and sometimes you just need to vent and just get stuff off of your chest, and
Exactly.
have somebody
Exactly.
there to just listen for 5 minutes, just so you can get it off your chest, and maybe just process things too. You know, like sometimes you you have stuff that you got going on, and sometimes just the action of talking about it with somebody, even if the other person doesn't say a word and they're just sitting there listening and you're talking, sometimes that just helps you process the things in your head, and help you make sense of the things that are, you know, a little crazy in the world, right? And
Definitely agree with that.
and I gotta imagine, especially being in you know the special operations community, that you know, and especially during that time period, you know, back then, mental health support was probably not a top priority in a lot of guys'
Yeah.
minds, right?
Oh yes. It was definitely, and again, to piggyback off of what you just said, they can't really talk about much that,
Hmm.
and they, it's not that they actually wouldn't, it's so much different in this realm of things where they can't.
Yeah,
And it's something about their operation or something that they, have to practice good OBSEC. So, like, no giving the information out there for the enemy and all that stuff. So, it was a definite hardship, and it speaks volumes that, just like in everyday life, you have someone to come home to and bounce things off of that
yeah,
you've been through the day, and he couldn't do that. And if he went to speak with someone about it, then there goes his top secret security clearance,
that's
and
right.
so to speak. So, and that's a huge hardship for a lot of these guys. Um, I've gotten on my soapbox about that. That I feel like that, being in the field that I'm in with counseling, rehabilitation, and so on and so forth, and doing the grief counseling that I have for our kids, it is so imperative to be able to speak things that are on your chest and get them off, and be able to process and transition to the next thing, and when they can't because of their job livelihood, that takes a toll. It takes a
Right.
serious toll on their psyche.
Yeah, because then you're just living with your own thoughts, and you can't tell those thoughts to anybody really. And you know, I think a lot of our listeners can probably relate to this. Sometimes those thoughts aren't the best thoughts to be living with, especially
No,
all alone, you know. and
no.
and you want to be able to, you know, get some of those thoughts out, and let them go to wherever they need to go, that's not sitting between your ears. And
Yes.
that that's something that you need to be able to, at times you need to be able to talk to someone about. And you know, for me, as I'm listening to this story, and kind of some of the issues, you know, even about just going to talk to a mental health provider about whatever it is that maybe is going on, to me, it seems like it would be such a simple solution to have
You would think.
just have a mental health provider who also has the same security clearance, that can
Also,
be can be, you know, talked to about, you know, whatever these situations are. I don't know, maybe it's not that simple, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but to me it just seems like that would be a simple way to get around some of this, and allow these people, especially in special operations where they're dealing with some high intensity stuff all the
oh, they
time,
are.
and they got to be able to
Let it
talk,
out.
let it out, talk to some. I mean, they're human too. I know they're like the superstars of the military, like
Yeah.
they're put up on that
Robotic,
pedestal. Yeah, exactly. But
superhero,
but
can
gosh,
handle anything on their shoulders.
they're people just like everybody
Exactly.
else,
We're all
you know.
human beings. Yes.
And it would actually be weird if they could just turn everything off, and just be literally like a robot.
Literally
And
unnatural. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. That as a matter of fact, if that's how they are, I'm a little more concerned about that. If they can do that, you know. So that to me, just, I don't know. We're talking maybe too many steps ahead right now as far as solutions go and stuff like that. And I don't know, maybe things are different now than they used to be, but you know, gosh, it just seems like to me that that's such a simple solution. Maybe again, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but
Like that, there are so many things in life that we make so much harder than what it really should be.
yeah,
If there's something that works or something that can help, why don't we go that avenue? Why don't we try this
right.
and have some strategies for it instead of just pushing it aside and having the military and the soldiers deal with it in their own way. There should be something that is addressed even before as a preventative measure,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
know, because some of these soldiers are young. And when you get that top secret security clearance and you're, let's go do this for, there are things that need to be processed and transitioned into from one deployment to the next. And when you stack on deployments, which my late husband did 4, and the last 2 were to Afghanistan for 18 months each.
Mm-hmm.
So when you stack all that on top and not really think about the long-term effect and how we need to have a goal where we get these addressed, it's mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, it is. And the way I've thought about this type of scenario is kind of like if you're wearing a backpack or a rucksack or something, and every trauma or every kind of issue that you're dealing with, you just kind of throw it in that rucksack. I'll take care of it later. I'll take care of it later. But when
Yeah,
when you don't actually get the opportunity to take care of it and actually unpack that rucksack, eventually you're going to collapse under the weight of it.
yes.
I don't see any other way. I mean, I've carried some really heavy rucksacks before, and I've come damn close to almost collapsing, under the weight of them. But it's eventually you say, okay, there's no more room. I can't fit anymore. Either somebody else is going to have to carry it, or we're not going to bring it, or
That's the
something
sad
else has
truth
to
that you
happen.
bring that up, because if someone else has to carry it, usually it's your close-knit
Yeah.
family. And that's the sad part about it, is not realizing or recognizing that's what's going to eventually be what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And then because there was a state where I had built up walls and I kind of sheltered our boys from what was really going on while I was trying to help my husband at the time and try to keep it how bad it was in front of them, and it just ended up all crumbling down.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. You hit it right there.
Yeah.
And they ended up starting to ask questions like, what's going on? Why is dad this? And, you know, it just, it was a ripple effect, severe.
So all these issues compounding, eventually, I got to imagine there were some maybe warning signs that maybe stood out to you, and maybe things that seemed more off than they had been, kind of in as these things were accumulating. What were some of those things that were kind of piling up for you?
Oh, the typical warning signs that they do talk about are very true. There are things where the soldier will distance from even family members
Mm-hmm.
or, outside family members, cousins, brothers, uncles, and so on and so forth. Some of their behaviors are different as far as every other day when he would come home, we would wonder, okay, what version are we going to get
Yeah.
today? That was a huge significant turn. Because we could get happy, go lucky, let's go grill, let's go here, let's go there, let's do this. And life was great. And then, 2 days later, it might be, walking in the door and zombie fight and leave me alone and just horrific behavior. Or, 3 days after that, it could be coming home and being agitated, getting really loud and yelling and having a hard time decompressing,
Mm-hmm.
which was a huge thing for us. We always talked about decompressing and just, having peace and quiet and all that good stuff. It was significantly hard because the boys were so young when this was all transpiring, and I just, like I said earlier, I tried to build walls where they would, I'd have to separate the two.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's go do our homework, this, that, and the other. Let's go right into this transition. And, as soon as I see something flaring up, then I try to separate and do something for both parties and stuff, which was really hard because the boys would be really confused and question. And, the older they got, the more they started to realize and ask questions.
Yeah. So next kind of logical step in my mind is, hey, whatever is going on just ain't working. And
Mm-hmm.
and so in my mind anyways, it's like, okay, if you're doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. That's kind of the definition of insanity,
Exactly.
right? So were there any resources or any types of things at all that your husband was able to utilize, and any kind of support systems even within his own unit, or whoever he was serving with? Were there people there that he was able to talk with, and if so, like, what was it helpful at all, or were there just not any resources that he could have used?
Well, we did reach out to our chaplain, and we did utilize our medical clinic on base facilities. And I tried so hard to encourage different avenues, even off the base,
Mm-hmm.
off the military installation, because of the fact of, the top secret security clearance, the field exercise, the fact that he didn't want anyone knowing. He would call me in middle day and be in a full blown panic because there's, helicopters going over our base, and he's reliving something
Mm-hmm.
that he had to do during deployment. It was absolutely a huge red flag warning sign for me. So that is when I did highly encourage that we go talk to the chaplain, and first and foremost, because I knew at that point, okay, this is getting pretty severe. I don't want to tell him, honey, this is not normal.
Right.
Because you cannot say that type of wording. But it really, in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, wow, we're in America. It's 2012, whatever it was. And he's thinking that he's really revealing that he's thinking he's under attack. There's something that he's reliving, and it's not something he can just bounce off of and bounce back from. And
Mm-hmm.
he's at his desk in his workplace, and they're doing something with, researching. And
Right.
but those types of things that you can do on base are all great. They're so good that they have those resources on base. But it was almost like a level of fear for him that I had to strategically think of things off the base. There were even one point in time where we have a son that's on the autism spectrum. He had services through TRICARE, and I at one point in time said, okay, I'm going to need your help, Dr. So and so. I know this is appointment for, but he even knew that there were signs, and the boy's dad, that okay, we probably do need to have like a family session,
Sure.
and even
Sure.
utilize that so it's off the record.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my strategy, to do that so he would not feel like he had to make an appointment, do this, and talk about it, and reveal all this stuff all up here between his ears that he needs to get out, because it was starting to affect our family at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And boys were asking questions again, like I said. So I thought, okay, Doc, I'm going to need your help. This is how we're going to do things, because it's not just right here, it's affecting the boys over here. And I'm going to need your help with this. I don't know if that was wrong of me.
No,
It was,
I don't think so. I mean, it sounds like y the outside of the box kind of thinking that you might need to do, right? If you have somebody who, they're worried they're going to lose their job, or their security clearance, or whatever it is, and they're just not willing to go the traditional route because that's going to put a big red flag on them, and paint a target on their back. That's I mean, you kind of are put in that situation where you have to think outside the box.
yes.
Otherwise, I mean, what else is there? And so, I know there's tons of organizations out there now, and which they may not have been around at the time, or maybe not all that well known, but they offer services. Maybe it's counseling service, maybe some other recreational type therapy, or different things for folks to do, and they don't report to anybody. They don't report to your chain of command or anything like that. It's like, hey, you need this, come on in, and we're not telling anybody unless it's a safety issue, and they have to do that for safety purposes. But hey, come on in, and I think those types of things are great, because people like your husband, or there's pilots and other fields in the military who, if they're seen going to a mental health appointment, it's kind of looked at like, gee, I don't know if you're going to be able to do your job anymore. and
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that's, I don't know,
It's terrible.
it's terrible. Yeah.
It's really heartbreaking, because there are so many other things that are going on within our society, our military, and so on and so forth, that are more detrimental.
Yeah.
And if these things are things that need to be addressed, I I'm kind of old school, like, okay, we need to nip this in the bud type of ordeal.
Sure.
Like, okay, this is going on, we need to address it and transition forward. And that's what I work with my students every day. And, life is about hardships. It's never going to be easy. But this
Right.
was a whole different, like, alien to be dealing with as a military wife. And to make the statement that it was tremendously hard to try to strategically maneuver things to help my husband, the boy's dad, would be an absolute understatement. Complete understatement. Because the level of significant detriment that was going on for PTSD deployment stacked on PTSD deployment stacked on PTSD, it was just stacking up on him.
Mm-hmm.
And I was witnessing it unfold right in front of my eyes, and I just realized I have got to do something. What do I do? This is going to be such a nightmare, such a nightmare. So I did strategically try to do things like that. I realized pretty early on that it was going to be more hard, and it was starting to bleed off into my shoulders and what was weighing on me, and trying to take care of the kids. And in Intel world, you move every 2 years. You get new doctors for the kids, you get new schools for the kids, you get new services for it was tremendously hard. So trying to strategically make those connections and resources, and try to make it where it wouldn't be such a hard decision for him to go ahead and let go and come and talk about what he needed to was hard.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. And some of the things that you mentioned, some of the kind of warning signs, I get that. I've talked to plenty of people who've had very similar issues when they came back home. Personally, I was in a Walmart one day after coming back from Afghanistan, and I kind of panicked because I didn't know where my rifle was. And like it was just
yes.
like one of those instinctual things. Like I carried my rifle with me everywhere. I mean, I just had it for so long with me, basically 24 hours a day. And then all of a sudden now I don't have it. It's like, oh my God, where is it? And then I kind of like looked around and I realized, like, oh, I'm home. I'm safe. I don't need it. I'm good. Not only don't I need it, I shouldn't really have it here anyways. That kind of thing.
Yes.
People would probably give me some looks if I was walking around with an M4 walking around Walmart. But
Yeah.
Anyways, to me it was just like an eye-opening thing. It's like you really do get into these patterns and these things that just like, this made me feel safe having my weapon with me. And then there was something, I don't know what it was, it just made me feel unsafe. And it's like, well, where the hell did the weapon go? And
Yes.
I need that to make me almost like a kid has like a blanket or something that just gives them a little security or whatever. That's what it felt like to me, is like I needed that thing for comfort or security or whatever. And but I can understand where those things kind of manifest and where they kind of come from, from my own experience. But there's also that next step that, like, it just gets to be to the point where it's like, I'm not even sure if we can drag this person back from wherever they are in their head. And I think some of the resources that you said, I mean, you definitely need to do something.
Yes. And like you said earlier, I believe things have changed since, back then, years ago, when I was dealing and going through this situation like I was, and I didn't know where to turn to. And I was trying to think of things. I believe that there are situations and organizations and things that have, come up and better these types of things, and PTSD help and stuff on bases and even off base, and organizations have really kind of taken it up on their shoulders to help. I do know that the chaplain was very good about helping Jason with a lot of things that he could talk out, but as far as going the full detail and such, hopefully they have changed some things on base where it can help with that. But I think you hit it right on the nail. When you're overseas and you're in this war zone, this situation where it gets for a certain period of time in the environment that you're in, and you get to a comfortability level of having your gun and coming back and transitioning back to where you do not carry that around with you everywhere you go. And it is something that's effective because it's in a whole new, okay, I've got to switch back into this, my normal, which what is normal, and
Right. And I've had conversations with some people before, and actually one person, I'm drawing a blank on the name right now of who this was, but they said, what is normal? Well, give me a definition of normal. Normal is something that it's like always changing. There is no true sense of normal, right? Normal in Afghanistan as a soldier is, having your body armor, having your weapon, having, 200 plus rounds of ammo on you, and all these other things. That was normal. But then you come
yes,
home, that's not normal anymore. And
yes,
that's just a different way of thinking. And so, even relationships, as a single person, it's normal to have to cook dinner for yourself or go out to dinner and get stuff for yourself. Then
yes,
you get married. Now you have two people that you have to do. And then you have
yes.
kids, and it makes it even more. And there's like a whole other
Chaotic.
layer of complications that go in with all that. And normal is just like a continuously evolving, ever changing thing. And I think the reactions that he was having to the stressful situations that he had also were normal. Those were normal reactions to, let's face it, abnormal situations that he likely went through, right?
Yes, yes. It wasn't, and that's what I kept telling him. These aren't things that are abnormal that you're feeling and that you're fearing, and that things that you're processing, and that getting up in the middle of the night and not being able to, your day and night has changed
Yeah.
coming back over into the United States. And, we just have to give it a little bit of time, and you've got to process. And, but those things, even just those things, just transitioning from being a 12 months away from your family,
Mm-hmm.
that's a significant time frame where your kids don't even realize who you are because they were so young when you
Yeah.
left for a year. It's a lot to tack on, trying to process and go through what you're going through from your deployment, coming back into, family life, and being able to just reset. I know that they started doing some transition sessions on military installations, which I thought was really good for dramatic play of, resourceful people trying to act out some of the things that you may go through when you're coming back into your family life and stuff, which I thought was amazing. Amazing.
Right.
That was, I want to say that was after the third 18-month deployment to Afghanistan that Jason did. So it was a little bit late in the game, but it was definitely needed.
Sure.
Um, I feel like if he had had that after that second deployment for a year to Iraq, it would have helped tremendously. Again, great. I'm very grateful for it. And I think it's an amazing step that they took forward for the military families. So that was really helpful.
Right. And in that case, it may have just been timing. It maybe just was a little bit too late for
Yeah.
that situation. So I know we've kind of danced around the issue, I'm sitting here talking to you and I'm not talking to your husband. And, there's obviously a reason for that. And so, kind of leading up to his death, were there any kind of like big red flags that were like right before, or was there anything that kind of stood out to you in those situations that, kind of like right up, around that time?
Yes, there were several things that stood out to me of the warning signs. The demeanor changes began to progressively get even worse, almost into a realm of, oh my gosh, I'm not reaching this person
Mm,
anymore. Like, he's unreachable, and it's like he's just a blank stare in my face, and I just don't know. I would kind of get in his face and like, hey, I'm here, please, you know tell me how to help you, and it was kind of like one of those things you see in the movies, that help me help you. I,
yeah.
I just I just need to know what you're thinking. But he was just so, it wasn't even a distance. It was like he was there, but he wasn't there mentally. He had already checked out
Hmm.
and really didn't know how to help himself. the progression had gotten to a point where he just was so checked off from us.
Yeah.
And it was just heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking. The different demeanors that he would, you know, be when he would come home every other couple of days, every other third day, or so on and so forth. I just struggled with, okay, this is kind of like emotional whiplash for me. I don't know what I can do.
Mm-hmm.
It got to a point where even other people were asking me in our neighborhoods or in our church. They were very helpful, but they didn't want to be too much engaged to push him away, because it would eventually push him away.
Yep.
Because
Yep.
he would know, okay, they're trying to reach me, you know, and build up that wall. And, you
Yep.
know, so circling back, I really feel like that I probably built up too many walls. And I felt to myself, how could I not help this person? How
Mm-hmm.
can I not help my husband, the boy's dad? How, you know, but those warning signs, I definitely knew I did not need to ignore. Don't, if anyone listening, don't ignore the warning signs. If your gut tells you, it's definitely something there. If you've known that person, that is your person, and you know, I did do some things strategically, but I also didn't know certain things to do for him as far as with the VA. That last 2 years was pretty significantly hard on my psyche. I was questioning myself of what I was helping with and what I was hurting, or if I was hurting something instead of helping. I definitely reached out to the VA crisis line, and just so happened that when I called and I let the people know, like, I don't know how to help my husband.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't know. And I need some strategies. I didn't know that at the time, this was years ago. I didn't know it. That was about 2 years before he passed away. And I let them know, and I was asking, what are some strategies? I need somebody to tell me what I can do. It's gotten to a point where, these last couple of years have been really hard. I'm noticing a pattern, and I'm noticing when it's going to flare up. And as the wife and mom, and, I'm very concerned that it's progressively getting worse each year. And we need to address something, but I don't want to upset him. He has went to a psychologist there at the VA, but he came home and was like, well, I went to my psychologist today that was supposed to help me with PTSD, and basically they've never deployed, and they're about half my age.
Yeah. Yeah.
You told me to go do this, Ashley, and this is what I did.
Yeah. And that's unfortunate too, because,
Ugh.
you tried to do these things and help, point them in the right direction and do all the right things, quote unquote, every situation's going to be different. So, what
Yes,
is the right
yes,
thing? I don't know. What you did,
exactly.
is it right or wrong? I don't know. I couldn't tell you, and I don't think anyone really could. But trying to do the right thing anyways, obviously with good intentions in your heart, and then something like that happens, and that becomes a turnoff for that individual who just doesn't want to talk to someone half their age or talk to someone who hasn't experienced what they've experienced. And I understand now that those are not automatic deal breakers, that you should just not talk to someone because they haven't deployed either, or maybe they never served either. Like I've talked to plenty of people who've never served, and doesn't mean that they don't understand what trauma is, and that they don't understand
Exactly.
what maybe not the exact scenario that you went through. Maybe they've never experienced something like that. Okay, great. They don't need to. But they know what trauma is, and they can talk about that. And
Yeah.
so that to me was something that I needed to wrap my head around as well when I came home. When I first came home, man, I lied through my teeth about needing mental health support or whatever. I went through like the mandatory screenings and everything after coming home, and
Yeah.
nope, everything's fine. I'm sleeping fine. Everything's good. Everything's just great. And they weren't. They were far from great. But I was like, you know what? I'll figure it out. I'll be okay. And it wasn't until I realized, months later, that I wasn't going to be okay. That's when I started, but my God, if I had just started earlier and gotten the help like at that point,
Exactly.
how much better would things be now, and how much pain and heartbreak, heartache, and all these things that I put on my family, how much would have been avoided if I just did it a little bit sooner. So
Do you feel like that a lot of military soldiers that come back, this is just something that I've had, kind of an opinion on. I feel
mhm.
like that they don't realize how fast it can spiral
Oh yeah,
because
no,
they, you
I
know,
I think
I can handle this,
yeah,
you know.
I think in my mind it was just one of those things that I'll figure it out. I'll handle it, and yeah, obviously stuff happened, and I had some traumatic experiences, and so I was like, yeah, obviously I'm gonna be sad, or I'm gonna be depressed, or I'm gonna be angry about the situations that took place. But it's like they just happened a couple of weeks ago, so obviously I'm still gonna be a little affected by them. Give it some
Exactly.
time, and it'll get better. But it wasn't until like I said, months later that I realized, holy crap, this has not gotten any better. And if anything, I don't even recognize the person who I'm looking at in the mirror anymore. This has gotten way worse, not
Yeah.
better, and it's gotten worse. I just like have outbursts over like the littlest things, and it's like, who the hell is this person? Like
I think that's what I remember Jason coming home one day before he passed, and it was a couple of weeks before, and he mentioned, you know, I just, I just, I said, how did your doctor's appointment go? And he said, I just kind of went off on the whole office, and I just came straight home. And I was like, what happened? And he said, they mentioned something about an extra charge of this, or this. And I'm thinking to myself, but I'm not saying it to him. Like, that's kind of the way that they, that's the name of the game, and you know,
sure,
you kind of get hit and tagged with different, extra charges and stuff. And I was like, this is not something new. So we've, witnessed this. And he said, I just went off on the entire office, Ashley. And I was like, and at the time I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he's never done that.
hmm
He's never, it's like one of those things that you see in a grocery store where someone's like going off about something. And you're just like, okay, there's enough like belt here for you to put your groceries up on,
right, yeah,
or something kind of wild like that. And I was like, well, what did you say? What did they do? Like, he said, I don't know. I just stormed out.
mm.
And just the fact that he came home telling me about it was huge, spoke volumes, that I think he was realizing within himself, there's something that I can't handle. There's something that I need to get addressed. And I said, and that's at the point where it was pretty evident to him that he did need something.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, there's just far too many of us who've gone overseas, you know, served, in a combat zone, literally lived in places where people wanted to kill us. They wanted us dead, and we survived that, and we come home,
Yes.
and then that's where we end up losing people. I've
Yeah.
lost several friends that way. I know anyone listening to this probably, at least if they don't know about somebody personally like that, who've taken their own life, they likely have heard stories from other people who do know that, that type of situation. And my gosh, it's like, how little sense does that make? You survive some of the worst things in the
I,
world just to come back to America, where you should be safe and should be able to get all the support that you need. But that's where we end up losing people, and that to me is, I mean, quite frankly, that's why I started this show. Is like I
yes.
just don't want this type of thing to continue, with these people. And it's not just the people I knew that I served with. Obviously, those people are, near and dear to me, and I want to, help support them in any way. But it's a widespread issue throughout the entire military
It
and
is.
veteran community. Military
It
families dealing with
is.
this all the time.
Well, I remember when I reached out to you, how hard it was for me
Hmm.
to just reach out to you.
Yeah.
And I remember you saying, I've been wondering if you were going to contact me And it is hard. It's a hard thing to talk about after, 4 deployments and over 12 years in the military, moving around sometimes we moved less than 2 years.
Uh-huh.
And keep in mind, we had a special needs child on the autism spectrum and a younger baby, and he had some special needs as well. And, we're away from family as soon as we got to Fort Bragg. Jason was 19 days at home, and then he was gone and over in Afghanistan. So, it was, unfortunately, the boys hardly saw him. And it's just, it leaves so many questions after these 4 deployments. And then the longest that Dad is home, then, we're trying to get back into family life and stuff. And the last deployment, 14 months into the last 18-month deployment to Afghanistan, we lost our house.
Oh.
Started all over with nothing, not even our cars. And he had to come home from devastation to devastation. And that was a significant shift as well. It was very overwhelming for all of us. We had thought, oh my gosh, every time he flies off and goes to the Middle East or deploys, we have to worry about him not coming home. And for hours, he was not able to get a hold of us and know if we were okay, because we had went through an F5 tornado. And when he returned back home, that was the start of how it started kind of spiraling, because he hit the ground running. We hit the ground running with starting all over and trying to find those resources after a natural disaster of a tornado, and trying to make sure that we get everything we can for our kids, and make sure they're okay. And so ultimately it did take a toll, all the PTSD stacked on PTSD, and then going through that. And then, he ultimately took his life.
Yeah, and it's obviously a very unfortunate situation that, I think these things are avoidable, given the right attitudes, the right mindset, the right, willingness to seek out the help. There's plenty of it out there. I talk to people all the time on this show that are offering all sorts of different kind of resources. And I say this to a lot of people, like if you've gone out there and you're like, yeah, I tried the therapies, I tried this and that and the other thing, and I feel like I've tried everything and just nothing's working, I guarantee you're wrong. There's
Exactly.
something else out there. I guarantee there's something else. And you just maybe haven't figured out what it is yet, but there's something else. And, best advice I think I can give is just keep trying things. Don't, yeah, sure, maybe you go to one therapy appointment and you don't hit it off with the therapist right away. Give it a few appointments. Don't no.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like anytime I first talk to someone, I don't know, I can be kind of awkward sometimes, and it's going to be an awkward conversation the very first time I'm talking to somebody. So I feel like maybe give it a couple times and maybe get to know the person a little bit more, and maybe get a little more comfortable with the person. And if not, guess what? There are tons of therapists out there. You can talk to a different
Exactly.
one.
That's what I kind of encourage. I highly encourage a lot of my students and people that I work around. Not everybody clicks.
Yeah, right.
Not everybody clicks. And when you don't feel, warm and fuzzy with this counselor, and you give it, like you said, a few times, and you're still not, I'm not feeling like I'm getting anywhere. Try a different avenue, try a different counselor, a different therapist. I've done the same thing with our sons. If I, see a developmental pediatrician, I went through several developmental pediatricians for my son on the spectrum. If there's something that I did not, feel like, okay, I think we need to keep trying, find a different, maybe in this military installation, we won't see a developmental pediatrician. Maybe we'll see a, psychologist or a pediatric neurologist, for, there's so many avenues that you can take.
Yeah.
And when you realize that, it's kind of like, I can lead a horse to water, but I can't make it drink,
Exactly.
You hear that all the time.
Yeah.
And that's so very true.
Yep. Yeah, and honestly, like when I was talking about my experience coming back from Afghanistan, went through the mandatory mental health screenings. That was them literally leading me to water. I'm the horse, so they're leading me to water.
Yes.
I didn't want to drink, and so I just avoided it all, and I got in and out, checked the box, and I moved on, and I think looking back on it now, I've obviously realized the error in my ways, I guess you can say. But, I think just a lot of folks out there make those same kind of mistakes, not
Exactly.
realizing how detrimental it is, not only to themselves, but to their families. I mean, we didn't talk about this necessarily, but I'm sure we can, maybe get into it another time, talking about, like a secondary PTSD where like the family starts to have some issues coming off of the
Oh,
PTSD of that.
yes.
And,
That's a
obviously,
whole other episode,
I
Scott.
know, I know. And it's obviously not something that anybody wants to do, but you also have to realize that you're not a burden to anybody necessarily. You're they love you as much as you love them, and they want,
Exactly.
like I'm sure you
They
wanted to
want
do,
help.
you would move heaven and earth if you could to get the help that he needed, and would not have looked at it like, oh man, I gotta go do this thing. Oh jeez, come on, get it
Yeah.
together. Like, you would not have felt that way at all. You would have been like, I'm glad I'm able to help, and that you're allowing me to help, and I'm sure that's more along the lines that you would have felt, as opposed to frustration or annoyed or anything like that, right?
That's a huge step for those in Special Operations Command or Special Forces or Rangers or
Hmm.
SEALs. That's a huge step to allow someone to help you
Yeah,
when
yeah.
you're supposed to be robotic
Hmm.
and superhero and hold everything on your shoulders
Yeah.
and be able to do everything. There, there's a huge pressure that comes along with it, and I knew that, but as the wife, I knew I was seeing things unfold that
Yeah.
were concerning.
Hmm. Well, unfortunately, it did end in tragedy. With your husband and your quite frankly your family, your community, the whole special operations community. I'm sure felt that loss as well,
Yes.
and it's one that tragically happens all too often. And I do want to have you come on the show to share this story, to talk about the you know, kind of the warning signs and the things like
Yeah.
that for folks who maybe just don't know, and they're, what do I even look out for in my loved one, and or in myself, like if anything that we've been saying here for any of the listeners sounds like, gee, I guess that's kind of me. Well, yeah, maybe you need to go talk to somebody, or if it's a loved one, a spouse, or a sibling, or whoever, encourage them to go get help, and think you may have to think outside the box, kind of like what you were describing, and find ways to get them to go to do the thing that, let's just face it, they probably don't want to do it, but
Yeah.
they probably need to do it, and so you might have to think outside the box, to get ways, and hell, if you need to share this episode with them to be like, hey, look, there was somebody else, and this is the outcome. We don't want that for you. I mean, do that. I don't care about listens and likes and downloads and all that kind of crap. That's not it. This whole episode exists if I can help one person. If you and I can help one person, that's
Yes.
exactly the intention behind this. Is I want to talk to that one person, and help that one person out, and hopefully keep them around so they can wake up tomorrow and see the sunshine, and realize that, hey, it can be okay, and it can get better. But I do, before we wrap up here, I do want to thank you for coming on. I know this is a deeply personal story. It's a emotional story, about you, your husband, your family, and this journey that you all went on, unfortunately, with a tragic ending. But I do thank you for coming on and speaking out about this really important topic that I think doesn't get discussed enough. And I think this is definitely a great place to start. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Scott. I felt it very heavy on my heart to be on this show to help, and it did take me a long while to muster up the courage. It is a very sensitive subject, and you've made this so comfortable about talking, and I feel my main purpose, just like you, is if I can help one person or if I can help a military wife, or even outside of the military, a civilian wife, and things that have been noticed after military, and so on and so forth. So
Yeah.
it is important, notice those warning signs, just keep an eye out. If you have to go and get the help and they won't, I did do that. I searched that avenue as well. So thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it as well. Thanks so much.